Okay, this is the third time I'm trying to record this, so let's see if we can make it happen. Alright everybody, good day, two-wheeled friends. This is Enrique from Full Dump Moto. Oh, yellow light. This is Enrique coming to you with a review video. Not too long ago on the channel we threw up a review of a 1988 Honda NX 250. So that video did pretty okay, I think. So today I wanted to try and make another review video, this time of my bike. A 2019 Suzuki TU250X. A very neutral, retro, classic, simple little motorcycle. This is definitely one of those bikes that's just a motorcycle. I feel like a lot of people, when they get started into biking, motorbiking and such, or they're thinking about getting into it, there's some models and like pictures that come into your head of a motorcycle, and I feel like the TU kind of embodies that simplicity of a motorcycle very well. It's kind of funny, the people that I've met on this bike and talked to, a lot of times it's like the older generations, the ones that grew up 70s, 80s, 90s. They all run in, when I chat to them about this bike, they all say kind of the same thing. They're like, oh, I had someone in the family, or my father had that kind of a bike, like that style. It brings back a lot of memories. Just I learned how to ride on that, you know, that kind of stuff. So a little bit of history. I started on a little CBR 125R, which was a piece of work, to say the least. It was not very easy to ride and learn on. It did have a lot of flaws, but it taught me how to ride in the harshest of ways. The clutch was abysmal. It was so light and it felt like it didn't grab whatsoever. The throttle was equally as bad and choppy, and the gearing was rough, to say the least. If you weren't perfect on your timing in terms of changing gears, clutch, throttle and all, it wasn't happy, and the gears would kind of rub. So learned on that, had that for about a year maybe or less, and then I went to the dealership and bought this guy outright. It was just such a fun purchase. Now, this wasn't like a massive jump in power. No. What we have here is a single cylinder, little thumper, air cooled at that. Two little valves doing their job up top rather. So we're not making sport bike power here. But the character of this bike and the way that it rides and how smooth it is, you know, clutch and the throttle, the transmission, the brakes or whatever, everything, the whole package, the styling of it, the fuel economy, all of that is just beautiful in this bike. And I've had like a litany of bikes since this one. I've had everything from the 250 to line, like a size bike, motor. God, I can't talk. I'm sleepy, guys. I'm still waking up. I've had everything from a 250 all the way up to a 750. I had a 600cc old school. Like, I had the old R6 before it was kind of called an R6. I've had, you know, cafe styled a CB 650 that was like cafe'd out. I've had a few bikes. And the TU was always there through them all and survived, like outlasted all of them, rightfully because it's brand new. But I've always I rode all those bikes, and I kind of always went back to the TU, half because I had no choice, but I just missed it so much. There's something about this bike, there's that term, it's more fun to ride a slow bike fast than a fast bike slow. It rings so true with this bike. May not be the fastest, it may not have the strongest brakes, the best suspension, yada yada yada, but the simplicity and just the active riding that this bike kind of puts you into, like the back to basics, I haven't found a bike that has beat this one yet. So yeah, 250cc single cylinder air cooled with 5-speed transmission, making I think around 20 horse, maybe 13 foot-pounds torque. I'm not quite sure the specs on that, but you got yourself a single disc up front, and you got yourself a good old classic drum in the rear. So not a ton of stopping power here, though. I feel like the Suzuki designers, hi buddy, you're poking out. I feel like the Suzuki designers thought, if you're only bringing 330 pounds to a stop, you could have a drum in the rear. Keeps the cost down when they were doing cost savings. And I must say that drum in the rear is actually quite potent. It's pretty strong. Suspension, you just have a very simple setup. It's just a non-adjustable fork and twin springers in the rear with five levels of adjustment there, mostly. And that's really it. Besides the fuel injection, the ECU, you have nothing on this bike that's fancy. You have yourself the classic speedometer with a good old trip meter. Oh my god, we're crawling. With you got the speedometer with the little trip meter. You got your neutral light. And you got yourself you got yourself the neutral light, and then you got yourself a baby fuel light. And that's it. You don't have any fuel, you have no fuel gauge. So, you got to do it old school and just kind of learn what your bike's limit is for fuel economy. Which I will say, this bike gets quite good fuel economy. You got yourself a 12.5 liter tank, and you can average, I don't really know what it would be like kilometers per liter, but you're averaging around 300 to between 3 and 350-ish kilometers of range on a tank, which is pretty darn good. And this bike being so good on fuel and so cheap to fill, it just makes it a no-brainer. Something interesting about this bike, though, is that it has a dual throttle valve, and so I think it's like a butterfly valve, but basically, from my understanding of it, it just opens up the airway or the fuel airway or whatever it is. It has one valve that's open, basically, obviously, as you're rolling on the throttle, and then the second one is controlled by the ECU. And what that does is it makes the bike really smooth on your throttle. There's no real twitchiness or grabbiness with the throttle, but it also makes the torque curve of this bike extremely linear. A lot of people know that, or every rider knows, usually you have yourself a torque curve and a power band, and basically the bike's not making its best power until it hits a certain power band or certain revs. And so, you're kind of choppy down low, and then once you get higher in the RPMs, the bike kind of takes off from there. But on the TU, it's kind of just power all the way through, and it's very linear, so you kind of feel like you got more power on tap with this bike, it feels like it's pushing way harder than the numbers are suggesting, which is really nice. It's good for new riders with a twitchy throttle hand, and it's really, really fun for experienced riders that jump on and just kind of slam on the throttle and just bang through the gears. Yeah, it just kind of makes the bike feel like it's tugging really hard, like you have something bigger under your legs than you really do. You're not hitting blazing speeds on this thing, but getting up to those speeds is easily achieved. So that's a nice little addition for this bike to have. Now, this is my daily driver, and I couldn't be happier. All the other bikes that I had, especially the sport bike, my God, the clutch on that thing was rough. It was really heavy, and the bike itself didn't want to be lugged, and it wanted to be ridden fast, hard. So it made it a really bad daily driver for me in the city that we live in. It just did not like traffic. And the other bikes too were kind of in the same boat. They were good. The KLR, when I had that, was probably the best, like the second best, like evenly matched with this one in terms of a good daily rider, naturally. God, that bike was fun. But the clutch on this one being so light and the throttle being so easy. I will say though that the throttle throw on this bike is quite hilarious. Like from closed all the way open, like look at that. It's something. So yeah, it just makes this bike such a joy as a daily rider. Easy on gas. You're not going to be like hurting you're not going to be giving yourself any carpal from the throttle being, or the clutch being so ridiculously heavy. And everything else on it is just so dead simple to fix. There's nothing really that you can't access on this bike if you need to fix it up. Everything is naked and exposed and right there. So working on it is a breeze. Really don't have to take it to a mechanic very often unless you're new and mechanically inept at the moment, which to any new riders, you will naturally learn those talents to fix everything. You're gonna have to. And nothing on this bike has gone wrong as of yet. I have 41,000 kilometers on it in the 4 years that I've owned it, and it has been beautiful for all of that. Oh, construction are we doing, huh? Now we can talk about some of the upgrades that I've done to the little guy. It is nowhere near stock. I have thrown on aftermarket handlebars. These are drag bars. The ones that come on the bike are kind of like your tracker style, T-bar style handlebar. They were like chrome, like so many accents on this bike that has, and I could not vibe with that. It also just made it feel really cramped, like the handlebars were like here, I think it was, or something, and these ones are stretched out. Upgraded. Yeah, so I did that, and it just makes the bike a little bit more cafe racery. Bar end mirrors, because the mirrors that came on this were like car mirrors. They were massive and chrome. Put a little dart fly windscreen on there, which actually does something. Initially I put it on there just for retro look and styling, but it actually works surprisingly at deflecting some wind. Not a whole lot. You're definitely getting blasted with wind everywhere on this bike, but it does make a little bit of a difference. The tires on this guy are upgraded front and rear. The original tires I think comes stock with 90/90/18 up front and a 110/90/18 in the rear. The front is now a 110/90/18 and the rear is a 130/90/18. So it makes the bike it feels a little bit more planted with the bigger tires on it. Feels way better in the corners, like leaning over. And I just like the look that it gives the bike. It just makes it look a little bit more meaty. What else? There is a slip-on exhaust that I have put on from a company called Brogue Motorcycles. I can put a link down in the description if anyone wants to check them out. They have quite a litany of parts for multiple bikes, kind of in the cafe style category. But yeah, I put a slip-on this bike that it mounts directly to where the old muffler mounted to, and it opens up the bike a little bit more. It gives it a better sound. The old exhaust on it looked like a friggin' megaphone, and it kind of made it whisper quiet. I mean, it had a little thump to it, but you know, it needed a little bit more character. This one just gives it that little bit of a growl, a little bit of pop that I really like it. It's not obnoxious like you hear some guys with some single cylinder engines with a big old can on there, and it just sounds, holy moly, it's just snapping through the sound barrier. This one doesn't do that. It just makes it grumbly, you know, a little rascally, a little ratty, and I really, really like it. And when I bought the exhaust, the Brogue Motorcycles, they also sent along a booster plug. I think it's to account for the emissions and like the difference in what the exhaust is doing, the air intake and stuff. So it's just a little probe. I connected that, and it opens up the bike ever so slightly while also improving your throttle response. Although this bike already had a pretty darn smooth throttle, it made it even smoother. So it's like glass. It's just smooth all the way through. And then what else? Upgraded the gearing on this bike. It used to be a 15 tooth up front and I think a 43 in the rear. All it is now is a 16 tooth up front and a 43 in the rear. So basically that just changes the gear ratio ever so slightly. Makes it a little bit, like the gears are just a little bit longer, which is really nice on this bike. The old gearing on it, you know, first gear was barely a gear. And you don't take this bike on the highway, but it made it a little bit nicer if you need to do any quick, you know, exit to exits on the highway. So the bike doesn't really have an asthma attack anymore when you're revving it up. The gears used to be, I think, like first gear would go to 20 and then second gear would go to like 45 or 50. Now it's like first gear goes to 35 roughly, and so it's an increase like that, which is really nice. You're losing the slightest bit of acceleration, you're just gaining more top speed. And that's kind of all that I've really done to the bike, enough to turn it, to make it mine. And I don't have any intentions on really selling it anytime soon. I have this like romanticized feeling that I want to get it to like 75,000 kilometers and like keep it, give it to my kids. Like, you know, it's one of those bikes that you keep for people to learn on in the future, but also because it's a little nostalgic to you. This bike made me a way better rider. And when I moved on to bigger bikes and whatnot and got familiar with those, I always went back to this bike and brought those skills that I learned from the bigger bikes to this one, and it's just a blast. So this is my daily rider. Until something changes, I really don't want to sell it. And I have some future plans for it to turn it more cafe racery or brat styled, but outside of those things, there's nothing else I really have to do to it in terms of performance. I mean, this bike, you didn't buy this bike to be a performance monster. You don't try and do the things on it that it just naturally can't do. And you don't get mad at the bike when it can't do those things, because that's not what it's for. When I go out for rides and I just want to hit some twisties, which this bike can actually do pretty darn well. It can handle itself in the twisties. The rear like the dual springer, twin springer rears and the front, it's kind of cushiony. You know, this bike is kind of soft, so you're like right there, I was just bouncing, so you're kind of bouncing through corners, you know, especially when you hit a couple of ruts and rough spots. But it can hold the line really nicely. I've pushed it pretty hard and it just holds beautifully. So when I go out for rides and I hit some of those, you know, curvy roads and I'm just looking to get my mind off things, this bike is beautiful for that. It is the truest form of throttle therapy. You're not flying down the roads, you're just enjoying the ride. So that's kind of my little review of the TU250X. They stopped making them in 2019, so I kind of have the last model year of it, from 1994 all the way to 2019. That's how long they made the bike. So you can't buy them new anymore, but if you find one and you're thinking of getting into it, I highly recommend it. You won't find a more simple and beautiful little bike than this. So, the Suzuki TU250X. So fun, so amazing. Highly recommend it. Anyways, guys, that's my review of the bike. There she is. So simple. Anyways, guys, that's it for today's video. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good day, ride safe.